Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Can I please have CalRecycle staff turn on your webcam so I can introduce you to our audience members? So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the SB 1383 Implementation Record and Record Keeping Tools webinar. My name is Julia Dalla, and I am part of the SB 1383 team. Before we dive in today, I would like to introduce you to who is presenting and available for questions today. All right, so I see everyone's on here. And Jocelyn, could you pause the screen share so we can see everyone's faces a little bit bigger? Thank you so much. So our main presenter for today's webinar is Priyanka Talonki. She played a critical role in helping to develop the record-keeping tools that we will be discussing today. Also joining Priyanka from the record-keeping tool development team is Jocelyn Trejo Arce and Mark Lorenzen. They will also be moderating the question and answer session today. Joining us from the compliance team is Alan Illisorio. From our procurement team, we have Michelle Dewey and Scott Beckner. From our edible food recovery team, we have Timothy Hall and Alexandra Rosado. From our collections team, we have Kara Morgan. And finally, we have Ashley Yee, our SB 1383 program manager. For today's webinar, we will provide an overview of the implementation record tool and performance-based implementation record tool that we developed to assist jurisdictions in meeting the record-keeping requirements. After the presentation, there will be an opportunity for attendees to ask questions about these tools. We are recording this webinar and will post the recording and presentation once they are made ADA compliant. The last thing I would like to mention is that we will be toggling between the PowerPoint presentation and the tools, so we will try to make these transitions as seamless as possible. Thank you for joining us today, and I will now hand it over to Jocelyn. Thank you.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Julia. Good morning, everyone. We'll be going over the instructions for the Q&A session, which will follow the presentation. If you are watching the webinar via the CaliPay broadcast, you may email your questions to the SLCP inbox. If you are using the GoToWebinar platform, please type your question into the question pane. Staff will unmute participants in the order that questions come in so that you may read your question out loud. Note that you will need to unmute yourself on your end in the GoToWebinar when asked to by CalRecycle staff. Please also state your affiliation before asking your question. For those watching via the broadcast, we will verbalize some of these questions and responses in the GoToWebinar platform for you to hear as well. CalRecycle staff may respond to some questions in writing through GoToWebinar, so please review the question pane for those responses. Questions and comments regarding the merit of the regulations were responded to during the rulemaking period. So today we will focus on the questions or clarifications regarding the implementation record and record keeping requirements and the model implementation record tools. I will now hand it over to Priyanka for her presentation.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Priyanka Talonki, and I'm the project manager for CalRecycle's efforts to develop the SB 1383 Model Implementation Record Tool and the Model Performance-Based Implementation Record Tool, which I'll be presenting an overview of today. While today's presentation will focus on record keeping for jurisdictions, there are also record keeping requirements for self-haulers of organic waste, food recovery, and transfer and processing facilities that will not be covered during today's presentation. CalRecycle is working to develop record keeping tools to assist with this. Next slide, please, Jocelyn. So let's move on to an overview of section 18995.2 of the SB 1383 regulations. A jurisdiction is to maintain all required records within the implementation record. The implementation record is to be stored in one central location, physical or electronic, that can be readily accessed by CalRecycle within 10 business days of the request. The implementation record is to include records or information within 60 days of creation. All records are to be retained by the jurisdiction for 5 years. The implementation record is to include, at a minimum, a copy of all ordinances or other enforceable mechanisms, contracts, and agreements, a written description of the inspection and enforcement program, all organic waste collection service records, all contamination minimization records, all waiver and exemption records, all education and outreach records, all hauler program records, all jurisdiction edible food recovery program records, all recovered organic waste product procurement target records, all recycling content paper procurement records, all inspection, route review, and compliance review documentation, all records of enforcement actions, all records of complaints and investigation of complaints and compliance with the jurisdiction's inspection and enforcement requirements, all records required by jurisdictions implementing a performance-based source-separated organic waste collection service. Next slide, please. To assist in meeting implementation record and record-keeping requirements, CalRecycle has developed the Model Implementation Record Tool and Model Performance-Based Implementation Record Tool. These are optional Excel-based tools collaboratively created by subject matter experts at CalRecycle to assist jurisdictions with maintaining an electronic implementation record and meet the jurisdiction record-keeping requirements outlined in the SB 1383 regulations. These tools can be found on the CalRecycle SLCP homepage. Jocelyn, can you please pull up the SLCP homepage on the CalRecycle website? So once you are on the SLCP homepage, scroll down to record keeping. Then, after record keeping has been selected, scroll down to jurisdictions, and you can see that the tools are available here. If you click Learn More, you get more information about jurisdiction record keeping and more information regarding the tools. So with that, let's please move on to an overview of the tools. Jocelyn, can you please pull up the Model Implementation Record tool? Beginning with the Model Implementation Record tool, you'll note that both of the tools, the performance-based tool, is similar and consistent in design, and much of what is covered for this tool is consistent with the performance-based tool. They're designed to assist jurisdictions with record keeping for implementing a performance-based source-separated organic waste collection program as defined in Title 14 of the California Code of Regulations, Section 18981.1, Article 17 for the performance-based tool. This is the Model Implementation Record tool. Our goal was to create a tool on a widely available and accessible platform and to give jurisdictions a starting point to meet and understand record-keeping requirements. When the tools are downloaded, you'll notice that the sheets have been protected to prevent any unintentional edits in the cells. So to begin editing, select Enable Editing at the top, and to unlock each sheet, right-click the sheet and select Unprotect Sheet. There is no password to unprotect the sheet. Jurisdictions may lock and/or protect sheets based on each jurisdiction's needs. The tool is organized by sheets or tabs, which represent the record-keeping categories outlined in the SB 1383 regulations. The tabs on the tool provide formatting, organization, and guidance on how a jurisdiction may maintain and track records. It also provides tables to maintain additional record-keeping details, and jurisdictions may adjust these tables to better fit the records the jurisdiction is maintaining. The regulations do not require that this information be maintained in this format. Nothing in the regulations prohibits a jurisdiction from coordinating with other parties to maintain records. So our first tab here, the Read tab, provides context for the tool, including information on SB 1383 and the section which describes record-keeping requirements. We've also included a file folder system a jurisdiction can use to organize files and maintain documentation required. Jocelyn, can you please show us the file folder system? The file location references may be noted in the file location cells, which you'll see throughout the tools and we'll be showing everyone shortly. So this zip file will be available to download and is linked directly within the tool. And it looks like this. Thank you, Jocelyn. Jurisdictions may choose to add additional folders and adjust file names to include additional records. Jocelyn, can you please show us the file folder system for the performance-based tool? So there's also a file folder system for the performance-based implementation record tool, and it looks like this. At this time, these tools are not connected to a CalRecycle hosted database or any other online databases. Nothing in the regulations prohibits the jurisdiction from storing documentation in an online or local database. CalRecycle nor the SB 1383 regulations dictate the type of database used to host or share SB 1383 documentation, only that the documentation be made available to CalRecycle within 10 business days of the request. Jocelyn, can you please pull the model implementation record tool back up? So we've also included disclaimer language about how the tools are for assistance and example purposes only. And we've also listed the email inbox for any questions about technical assistance or digital accessibility. We've also listed other resources that are available on the SLCP homepage. And there is a color key which indicates that the pale blue cells are cells indicated for user input. The tool also includes notes associated with certain cells that contain more information when you hover over them. The tool has a last updated date. This version was last updated on August 2nd, 2021. You can see on the Enforceable Mechanisms tab how each tab is laid out. Each tab includes instructions and guidance on how to fill out that tab, and the Implementation Record Requirements section includes regulatory language, the reference sections, and allows for the jurisdiction to indicate the location of where the record is kept in the blue colored file location cell. This top portion indicates the minimum information required to satisfy record keeping requirements. Below the Assistance section, additional tables and guidance jurisdictions can use to keep further details on their records is available. Example text is included in italics, and additional references are listed below. You can see on the Program Descriptions tab, it is noted that jurisdictions are required to keep a record of written descriptions of their inspection and enforcement program. A cell is included to either provide the description directly into the cell or indicate the location of where the record exists, which satisfies this requirement. Below the Assistance section is a more detailed table provided to keep track of descriptions for specific program areas. On the Organic Waste Service tab, jurisdictions can provide data in the cell or indicate the file location of the records. This includes information such as collection methods, geographical areas, and facility information. Below the assistance line are tables available to organize facility information and collection information. These tables may be adjusted to reflect any additional information. The Contamination Minimization tab allows for jurisdictions to maintain records on container contamination minimization, such as root reviews or waste evaluations, copies of contamination notices, and educational material, as well as enforcement records. You will also see that there is a section titled Additional Information on Record Keeping Requirements, which we've included to provide quick references to specific details required to be kept within contamination minimization records. For jurisdictions using root reviews as part of their contamination program, this tab provides a template to organize root review records. This includes information specific to the root review, a log of generators for which root reviews were performed, and allows jurisdictions to track contamination information, education and outreach information, and enforcement information. There is a cell where the jurisdiction can indicate where additional records or documentation exists. For jurisdictions using waste evaluations as part of their contamination minimization program, this tab provides a template to organize waste evaluation records. This includes information specific to each waste evaluation, sample data collected, and notification records. Some jurisdictions may consider creating a separate Excel sheet or workbook to address file size limitations for either the root review or waste evaluation records. A jurisdiction may also choose to indicate the location of where their root reviews or waste evaluation records exist on the Contamination Minimization tab and are not required to use these templates. The Waivers and Exemption tab allows for jurisdictions to indicate the location of and/or maintain records of the waiver issuing and inspection process, copies of waivers, and other exemption information. A waiver log has been provided to track waivers, waiver inspections, and enforcement information. We've included a quick reference regarding the specific information required to be captured for the inspection enforcement records, as stated in the SB 1383 regulations. So on the Education and Outreach tab, this allows for jurisdictions to indicate the location of their copies of education and outreach. Below the assistance line, it also includes an education and outreach log to track the types, description, and location of the education and outreach, as well as information on who it was distributed to. The Jurisdiction Hauler Program tab allows for jurisdictions to indicate the location of hauler records and provide information on the Jurisdiction Hauler Program. Below the assistance line, a table is provided to organize that hauler information. Again, minimum records requirements are noted directly above the assistance line. On the Edible Food Recovery tab, jurisdictions can provide edible food records by including file path references to documentation. Also included is additional information on record-keeping requirements and information required to be maintained in enforcement records. A log is provided to track food recovery organization and service information, commercial edible food generator information, and inspection and enforcement information. Jurisdictions may also choose to identify where these records exist. The Recovered Organic Waste Product Procurement tab allows for jurisdictions to indicate the location of documentation such as copies of invoices and certifications. A log is provided to assist in record keeping of purchasing details. A jurisdiction may include a copy of their procurement calculator tool, if desired, which is available on the CalRecycle website. The Paper Procurement tab is similar and also includes a log to track paper purchasing details and records. On the Inspection and Enforcement tab, it's noted that jurisdictions are required to maintain inspection and enforcement documentation. This tab allows for jurisdictions to indicate this information or the location of where these records exist, including but not limited to copies of inspection and enforcement actions, notices of violations, and educational material. Below the assistance section, additional information on what a notice of violation and an inspection, route review, and compliance review record is required to include. The Compliance Review tab allows for jurisdictions to provide documentation for compliance reviews and enforcement actions related to compliance reviews. Below the assistance line, a log is provided to track each time a compliance review is conducted and the generators which have received a compliance review. A jurisdiction may consider creating a separate Excel workbook to address file size limitations. Again, this jurisdiction may choose to reference the file location of where compliance review records exist. The Complaint Investigation tab allows for jurisdictions to provide complaint investigation records. A log is provided below the assistance line to track the details of each complaint. While jurisdictions are required to maintain specific complaint information, it is not required to be maintained to using this log or in this format. A jurisdiction may consider creating a separate Excel workbook to address file size limitations. That concludes my overview of the Model Implementation Record tool. Now we will move on to the overview of the Model Performance-Based Implementation Record tool, which is designed for jurisdictions implementing a performance-based, source-separated organic waste collection program. Thank you, Jocelyn. So here's the tool. You can see the format, design, and much of the content for the tabs are very similar to the Model Implementation Record tool and have been adjusted to reflect specific requirements for performance-based jurisdictions. Starting with the Read tab, the record-keeping requirements for performance-based jurisdictions are outlined. It's noted which records are and are not required to be maintained in the implementation record. There is a file folder system available for download in this tool as well, as was presented earlier. You can see on the Program tab, jurisdictions are required to maintain performance-based organic waste collection service records, such as the geographical area served, copies of agreements, and a list of generators. Below the assistance line, a table is available to organize records regarding designees operating within the jurisdiction, geographical areas served, and the location of the designee contract. Also available is a log to track generators and associated performance-based service information. A jurisdiction may consider creating a separate Excel sheet or workbook to address file size limitations. There are tabs between the two tools that are similar, and these include the following tabs: enforceable mechanisms, waste evaluations, edible food recovery, recovered organic waste product procurement, and paper procurement. There are also tabs which specify the requirement to maintain records as they pertain to edible food recovery, which includes the following tabs: program descriptions, education and outreach, inspection and enforcement, and complaint investigation. Records that are not required to be maintained have been excluded from this tool. This includes the following tabs: organic waste service, contamination minimization, route reviews, waivers and exemptions, jurisdiction hauler program, and compliance reviews. So that concludes my overview of the model implementation record tools. Jocelyn, can you please pull the PowerPoint back up? So for any questions or more information on these tools, subscribe to the SLCP listserv, visit the SLCP homepage on the CalRecycle website, or email the SLCP inbox listed here. I just want to note that this presentation is a guidance tool developed for information and example purposes only. Next slide, please, Jocelyn. And with that, I will now hand it back to Jocelyn to begin the Q&A portion.
Thank you, Priyanka, for the presentation. So here's a reminder of how the Q&A session will go. If you are watching the webinar via the CalEPA broadcast, you may email your questions to the SLCP inbox. If you are using the GoToWebinar platform, please type your question into the question pane. Staff will unmute participants in the order that questions come in. Note that you will need to unmute yourself on your end when asked to by CalRecycle staff. Please state your affiliation before asking your question. Questions and comments regarding the merit of the regulations were responded to during the rulemaking period. So today we will focus on questions or clarifications regarding the implementation record and record keeping requirements and the model implementation record tools. I will now hand it over to my colleague Mark Lorenzen to start us off with the first question.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Our first question will be from Brandy today. Brandy, I've unmuted you on our end. Please unmute yourself on your end and restate your name and affiliation and ask your question.
Hello, Brandy DeGarmo with the town of Portola Valley. My question was if on the list of record keeping requirements, if you're able to point out exactly which requirements are not required if a jurisdiction has a waiver. We are going to be pursuing a low population waiver.
Yeah, hi, Brandy. Oh, go ahead, Alan.
Hey, how's it going, Brandy? Hey, good question. So the tool isn't set up to gray out any specific areas for a jurisdiction who has any particular waivers. So that would be really a case-by-case basis depending on the jurisdiction and the waiver that they have. So I would just really recommend, based off of jurisdictions that do have the waivers, then it would eliminate the need for any record keeping of that particular waiving of the regulations that they are not required to do. So we could definitely talk offline and specific to cater to the waivers and then kind of pinpoint directly on what specific your jurisdiction would be required based off of any waivers that were approved by the department for your jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Hey, Alan, I'll just add, so with respect to low population waiver, basically, as you fill out that form, you will be letting CalRecycle know if you are including all or just some of the requirements in Article 3. So if a jurisdiction submits a low population waiver and waives all of the requirements except for the waiver section, point 11 and point 12, and point 13, you will not have record keeping requirements because you won't be subject to implementing those particular programs. So as Alan said, we're happy to do a follow-up to go over all of that, and a Lambda representative can work with you on that. Thanks, Alan.
Okay, thank you. Our next question will be from Stephen Halligan. Stephen, I've unmuted you on our end. Please unmute yourself, state your name and affiliation, and ask your question, please.
Thank you. Stephen Halligan, Orange County Waste and Recycling. My question is, if information for several categories is listed in one document, such as our franchise agreement, do we need to separate that information, or can we just provide the franchise agreement as a whole?
Hi, thanks for your question. So if all the records and the information is within one document, we don't prohibit that the records be separated or organized in any particular manner. It's just that the jurisdiction have and maintain this documentation and provide it to CalRecycle upon request. And it looks like Kara might have more to add to that.
Yeah, Priya, I'll just add that I think it would be really helpful for the situation you described is in your record, if you would note what parts of the franchise agreement cover which record keeping. I think that would make it better for CalRecycle so that we don't miss. If you think there's something in the franchise agreement that is addressed with something that's required in the record, kind of checking that box and letting us know. So I think that would be a good way to organize that. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add that the tool does allow for the file location reference to be able to include multiple records within each of those references. So for example, a jurisdiction, if they want to reference the same file multiple times throughout the tool just to help assist with organization, that's also an option as well.
And Priya, the tool's designed to add notes like this, right? So they could add reference, I have my franchise agreement in here for X, Y, and Z reason. Thanks, Priya.
Correct.
Okay, our next question will be from Nikhil. Nikhil, I have unmuted you on our end. Please unmute yourself, state your name and affiliation, and ask your question, please.
Hi, I'm with R3 Consulting, and a question that we've been asked by multiple clients is it worth it to pay recyclists or companies like Recyclist to maintain the records?
So, hey, thanks for that question. That's really a decision that the jurisdiction needs to make as far as, this tool compared to any other system they've got compared to purchasing any type of record keeping system. So really it's an assessment, probably depends on the size of the jurisdiction, the complexity of the jurisdiction, the role that the hauler or haulers are playing in maintaining records. So I think you've got to look at all of those things and make that decision. Priya, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think you covered it, Kara. It's really going to depend on the jurisdiction. There's going to be various factors, the size of the jurisdiction, the amount of documentation that's being kept and maintained, and just really just how the jurisdiction wants to be able to access those records and share them with other parties that they might want to share them with. So as you said, Kara, up to each jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next question is coming from Rosie Ledesma. Rosie, I've unmuted you, so please state your name and your affiliation and state your question.
Hi, Rosie Ledesma from the city of Woodland. My question is, are we supposed to link to the files are we supposed to link to files that are available online so that when CalRecycle requests it, they can also access the files, or are those links just for our internal use only?
Hi, thanks for your question. Oh, Alan popped on, so I'll take a crack at it and see if Alan has anything else to add. But just the manner in which the records are kept is going to be up to the jurisdiction. When the implementation record is requested, CalRecycle will need access to all of the documentation, so it will need to be made available to CalRecycle within 10 business days of the request. However, the jurisdiction wants to keep the information as far as it being online or physical, as long as it's in one centralized location and made available to CalRecycle within that requested time frame. That's really going to be up to the jurisdiction. I'll let Alan add on if he has anything else.
Yeah, I really wanted to pop on just so I could say hello to Rosie, but answered
Hey,
it.
Alan.
Yeah, answered it for the most part. I think where you're going there, Rosie, and something that's important is, if you are linking, and it sounds like if you're linking things to your own internal share drive on your servers, and if you sent us the actual implementation record and we were reviewing it, we wouldn't technically have access to that. But if you made available the access, if we were to visit or go down there to Woodland and look and make that available for us through your computer systems, we could review it there. So we don't necessarily have to physically review it from here at headquarters remotely. The jurisdictions need to provide us access to the implementation record to include, all the files and the links, so that way you don't have to throw everything on there. So again, it's a case by case, really depending on how each jurisdiction is maintaining their implementation record. But the key term there is providing us access to the implementation record so that we could review it.
Gotcha. Okay, good to see you, Alan.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Our next question will be from Paul Freund. Paul, you're unmuted on our end. Please unmute yourself, state your name and affiliation, and ask your question, please.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Paul Freund with the Tehama County Solid Waste Management Agency. I saw that my question was kind of answered in the chat, but the question is, other than an actual formal agreement with a food recovery organization or service and a jurisdiction guaranteeing there's capacity for generators of edible food within that jurisdiction, how do we prove to CalRecycle that there is capacity for edible food generators? Do we just say we've talked to X organization, they have a commercial freezer that's this size, and then that's the capacity?
Hey, Paul. Hey, thanks for your question and your follow-up. So I think, with edible food recovery, it's a little bit different than organic waste. And this is maybe a little bit off topic for the webinar today, but maybe other people have this question. When it comes to edible food recovery, the key is that you've spoken to the food recovery organizations and services that can provide service to the commercial edible food generators in your county, for example, and that they have provided to you what their estimates are for either existing, new, or expanded capacity. So, that's why we created the survey for jurisdictions to use to gather that information. That would be sufficient for you. Again, there's not record keeping requirements for Article 11, so it's a little bit off topic, but does that help answer the question?
It's somewhat. So it is under the record keeping requirements for the jurisdiction's edible food recovery program, section 18991.2A2 says a list of food recovery organizations and food recovery services in the jurisdiction and their edible food recovery capacity. And that could just be a simple, survey that they'd responded to, or even verbally, because I've met with pretty much every food recovery organization in Tehama County. They've told me what their estimated capacity is. We're just concerned that absent an agreement for that capacity, we don't really have anything to show CalRecycle there's verifiable capacity for our food. So
Got it. Yeah,
it doesn't have to be a formal thing, it sounds like.
Yeah.
We can just say, like I said, X organization has a commercial fridge, they have a commercial freezer, they have 28 square feet of space that they can store food, and that's sufficient.
So I see now why you're raising it as a implementation record requirement. So it would be the report from that food recovery organization on how much capacity they have. In addition, the food recovery organizations and services are providing the report on how much edible food was collected within that reporting period, calendar year, from the commercial edible food generator. So it's the food recovery organization or food recovery service that's located in the jurisdiction is reporting on the amount of material that it has collected over that period of time. And that can be for commercial edible food generators that are not located within the jurisdiction. So Paul, I think what I'll do is set up a follow-up with you and we can provide any more specifics. Is that okay?
That would be very helpful. Yeah, we'd like as many specifics as we can get.
You bet.
As possible, because we are coming up on that January 1.
You bet.
So thank you.
Absolutely. And I'll be following up. Thanks so much, Paul.
Appreciate it.
So our next question is coming from Marissa Garin. She doesn't have audio available, so I will be reading off her question. Marissa's question is, do we have any idea of how soon CalRecycle will start checking jurisdiction records since ordinances are just coming into play at the beginning of next year?
Yeah, I could jump in there, Pri, and if you want to add anything, you can. And I think Jennifer Gilbert, I think, might have had a similar question also that she raised. So the department is still developing their compliance and enforcement process. So specifically to answer your question, that's all being developed, and that is the process and procedures of how we're going through that and tackling that is still being developed. So I don't have a solid answer there for you.
Hey, Alan, I think we might have lost your sound.
Yeah, so I don't know where I got cut off there. Does that answer your question, or was I on mute the whole time? Or she doesn't have a mic.
I think you got cut off in the middle, Alan.
Okay, so I'll start over. So the department is still developing the enforcement and compliance oversight and how we're going to proceed with verifying the implementation records upon jurisdictions. So there is no set frequency that is still being discussed and developed today as we gear up for Jan 1, 2022.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Our next question will be from Christine Shen. Christine, I've unmuted you on our end. Please unmute yourself, state your name and affiliation and question, please.
Hi, everyone. Christine Shen from the city of Malibu. When you were sharing your screen, it looked like there was a tab where there were different requirements that were crossed off. I didn't see that on the tool online, and I was wondering if that would be an updated form that would be sent out to everyone.
Hi, I can address that question. So there are two different tools that have been developed. The first is a model implementation record tool. The second is a model performance-based implementation record tool, which I believe is what you're referring to. And the first tab on that implementation, the performance-based model implementation record tool is has some strikeouts on some of the text, which indicates in comparison to jurisdictions implementing a standard approach, which records are required to be maintained and kept in the implementation record as stated in the regulations. So there are two different tools, and the performance-based one is targeted towards jurisdictions implementing a performance-based program as defined in Article 17. Hopefully that answers your question. And they should both be available on the CalRecycle website, on the implementation record homepage, and under the record keeping page as well.
Thank you.
Our next question is coming from Jay Gilbert. Jay Gilbert, I've unmuted you. Please unmute yourself on your end and state your question. I think we're having some audio issues, so I'll just go ahead and read his question. Following up on Rosie's question regarding online versus local server hosting of all record-keeping documents, is CalRecycle planning to come and view the records regularly or only on an as-needed basis? This would determine which option we decide to go with as far as storing the records.
So I could jump in there, and I want to say this is Jennifer Gilbert, and if so, hi Jennifer. But if it's not, hello Jay Gilbert. But I'll take a stab at that question. So, kind of as I stated earlier, the enforcement and the compliance oversight for 1383 for the department is still being developed. What I can say, with regards to, there are separate servers and hosting, and if things are in various places, the important thing is to ensure that the jurisdictions are maintaining their records and having a record and almost a receipt of the implementation and having the requirements in the implementation record. The frequency and how often the regulations do say that it needs to be made accessible by the department within 10 business days. So that's something to keep in mind. I don't anticipate us going weekly, monthly, or every other month. This is something obviously that's still being developed and nothing's finalized, but I don't anticipate knocking on people's doors on a weekly basis to verify the implementation. Kara, did you want to add anything to that?
I think, Alan, you are spot on. I think the key is that we are expecting, as Alan said, for the records to be maintained, as they are created, right? So this isn't intended once a year, you go and gather up, like for your taxes, all your documents. This really should be an ongoing maintenance of your records. CalRecycle, as Alan noted, does have the ability to ask for the records at any time. We aren't necessarily going to do that, as Alan said, every week, ask you for your records, but it is available to CalRecycle. So it will definitely be a part of our compliance evaluation when we do the full review of a jurisdiction's programs, but we also have the ability to ask to look at the records at any time that we feel it's necessary. So I think, the tool that's been developed by this team is really intended for jurisdictions to be maintaining those records regularly, and so that you've got them on hand should CalRecycle request to view those records. So Alan, I think your response is spot on, and it's kind of different, right, for jurisdictions to be compiling these records, and that's why the regulations are flexible and allow you to keep records in any type of electronic file, on the cloud, in this document here, linked to it on your jurisdiction drives or whatnot, whatever that is, or hard copy for that matter. So there's a lot of flexibility built into the regulations for maintaining the records. Thanks, Alan. And hopefully that helped, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you. Our next question will be from Michelle White. Michelle, I have unmuted you on our end. Please unmute yourself, state your name, affiliation, and question, please.
Good afternoon, morning, what is it? We're still in morning. I've started early. Michelle White here, City of Roseville. This goes in alignment a little bit earlier to what the Recyclist database and a little bit to what Kara was just speaking, but wanted a little further clarification, if I could, on the, we're looking at different database options, and we already have several databases that have the information contained. Roseville has all the utilities, and we have a comprehensive billing system. with that. And we're looking at some add-on modules for that potentially versus the recyclist option. And then we also have procurement, but there are these different databases. So if we said something, you know, would you want us to use that model tool piece and kind of reference those databases? Is that enough for some of it? Because we're trying to make them specific enough that we can just kind of check some boxes and they would generate reports for us, whatever information. I don't know if that's enough, if that's making sense. But just kind of wanted clarity with if it's thousands of records. So I'm like, I don't want to take all of that out of a database and put it somewhere else and make more work for myself. So how do we strike that balance?
Yeah, I could start, Kara, and then if you want to jump in or Pri. Good question, Michelle. You know, obviously with 1383 and just through the presentation today, the amount of records that a jurisdiction is going to be required in the implementation record, there can be a lot. We do understand that jurisdictions, you know, have each jurisdiction has their own ways of how they're managing their existing files. You know, there's multiple databases. You know, we've heard some attendees today, you know, with shared drives, you know, different files. And the important thing and what the regulations state is that the implementation record needs to be in a central location, right? So whether if we're performing a review and we need to access it, if the department could access all the files within one location, whether it's through this database and access to this, some of these are paper, some of these, you know, are electronic in this tool, some of the recyclist, having access to it, that's the key. But each jurisdiction is going to determine really what makes best sense for them on how they want to manage their records. So we don't want to dictate how you have to have your information. We just want to ensure that you have a form or a method or a tool to organize your records in some sort of fashion. So jurisdictions may choose to opt to use one tool versus another or multiple. So it's really going to be a case by case, Michelle. So we're not going to go in and we're going to dictate how you're going to manage your records. It'll really be up to each jurisdiction and based off of what their needs are. Kara, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that was perfect. Michelle, thanks so much. You know, again, lots of records and you're trying to create efficiency. So I think as it relates to the earlier question about the franchise agreement, I think what would be helpful is in your record, if you were to note, for example, that database you were referencing, if you noted that in your record, that database houses X, Y, and Z record keeping requirement, that would be the organization that we would need so that we would easily know, okay, this database addresses this record keeping requirement. And so if you kept in your record this database and these are the requirements that it addresses, that would be absolutely sufficient. And so as Alan noted, there could be a variety of databases and sources, and you would just note, kind of organizing it, like this deals with this requirement. Did that help, Michelle?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you for that extra clarification. I was feeling that, but you know, just hearing you all speak to it just makes, you know, it eases everybody's anxiety.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I think the key, and Priya maybe can add on to this, is that from my perspective, I look at, here's my list of record keeping requirements, right? And then where are those records? So if this database it houses the records for, you know, record keeping requirement 1 and 2, then that's covered, right? And you just want to make sure that whatever the records are, you're communicating to CalRecycle that this record keeping requirement is addressed in this system. And yeah, it might be, how do I put it, a bit overwhelming for us to go look at that system and find it, et cetera, but we'll work with you and make sure that we make that connection of why you've told us that particular place that the records are kept, like in this case, a database, and how it matches up. So yeah, I think you're thinking.
So we're currently, this is teeing up another little offshoot question with that. We're currently kind of molding and the developer is potentially going to build some stuff. Is that something that if I worked with, I know you guys are building your enforcement on that end too, but is that something if we kind of get a model going, if we provided that to our local area representative to say, does this work for you? Is it at that point that they'd be able to give us input and feedback on that, to bless it, if you will?
I'm always reticent to bless anything because I always caveat it with my disclaimers. So you know that, Michelle.
Yes.
But yeah, we would be happy to look at it. From our perspective, our goal is compliance assistance first. We want you to have clarity on what the requirements are and what you're proposing to do, and is it going to be okay? So we would be absolutely happy to have that conversation. Now, it may not just be your local assistance liaison that we have look at that. So depending on what it is that you're sharing, we would probably have others on our expert team review that and give feedback as well. So yeah, please feel free.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you all.
You bet.
Yeah, I was just also going to add that we're always looking to make improvements to this tool. So if there are any suggestions or any sort of experience that jurisdictions have in using the tool, and any nuggets there, please feel free to provide those thoughts to the SLCP inbox. Thank you.
Thank you, Bree. Thank you, Kara. So our next question is coming from Christine Williamson. Christine, I've unmuted you. Please unmute yourself on your end and state your name and affiliation.
Hello, this is Christine Williamson from the Kern County Public Works Department. I have had under the paper procurement or paper product procurement section, I've had many of our departments reach out and ask what type of vendor certification or verification is acceptable, such as can they just get a letter from the vendor saying that it's 30% recycled content, 60% recyclable, that type of thing. And then they were also asking me, because it's a county department, so we have many different departments and they all do their own purchasing. So they were asking whether or not they could fill information out on a spreadsheet, kind of like what you've created, which is really nice, by the way, thank you. Or if they need to send me the individual receipts as well, invoices. And so they were just looking for a little more guidance in terms of that.
Yeah, good question, Christine. So we have been getting this question quite often that comes in, but specifically for the record keeping requirements for the recycled paper contact and procurement. Well, regulations are, they're specific in the sense that, anything that supports its compliance with the purchasing of recycled paper contact should be in the implementation record. So that can include, it's not limited to, so it's the copies of the invoice, and I think that's something that you reference, receipts, proof of purchase that describes the paper products by the volume and the type of all paper purchases, and then also copies of all the certifications regarding that are associated to it. So that's the record keeping aspect. Michelle has been answering a lot of the questions regarding to the paper, and I know Kara's been in there also, but Michelle or Kara, do you want to chime in there on the paper?
Sure, I'll go ahead and dive in, and then Kara, feel free to add anything else. I know you stated in your question, does it have to be like a letter, or what exactly does that look like? The regulations only require that the businesses provide that certification in writing, so they don't dictate exactly what form that might look like. So there is some flexibility in that, and we are considering developing a optional form, like a template form that could be passed along from the jurisdictions to their vendors, to the businesses from whom they purchase paper products and printing and writing papers, and a type of certification form that those entities could fill out to cover those requirements. So that is a tool that we are currently discussing internally within CalRecycle about developing. So stay tuned for such a tool to hopefully be an option for jurisdictions and help them to meet that requirement. And one thing to add as well, that certification requirement for the vendors, it's written in the regulations that it is to certify that the products meet the recycled content requirements as well as the recyclability requirements, but do note that there is an option to waive the certification requirement for the recycled content information, and because that can be verified as well through other means such as product labels and catalogs and those type of records. So there's also that option may be helpful to jurisdictions as well, and in working with their vendors. Anything to add, Kara?
Yeah, Michelle, that was great, and thanks, Alan. Yeah, some folks have thought when we use the word waiver, it means that they don't have to have that information. And as Michelle said, what it means is that you can identify the recycled content of that product in other ways, such as the label, et cetera. So our terminology of waiver has been a little bit confusing, so thanks for clearing that up. The other piece I wanted to add, Christine, is just like we've talked about responding to other questions, if within your other departments, they keep those records somewhere else, like electronically, they don't need to give you all of those invoices, et cetera. So if they keep them and then you know where they're kept, and you note that in your record such that when CalRecycle asks for it, you can say, yes, this record on paper procurement is kept by our purchasing staff, and it's in this database or in this electronic file or whatever, hard copy file for that matter. That would be key. So did that help answer the second part of your question?
It did, thank you. Yeah, my plan had originally been to do something kind of like what you've created here. So I really appreciate this tool. It looks great. It'll be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next question will be from David Briggs. David, I've unmuted you on our end. Please unmute yourself, state your name, affiliation, and ask your question, please.
Yeah, hi. Thanks.
Greg, sorry, before you go ahead, just doing a time check. I'm just letting everyone know that this will be our last question before we wrap things up.
I feel much luckier now. Okay. Thanks again for having this webinar. The webinars are great. I'm Dave Briggs. I'm from Napa County's Public Works Department. My question is, the SLCP regs detail that jurisdictions obtain letters from service providers notifying the jurisdiction of some provider activities. For example, the service provider would inform the jurisdiction of which processing facility it will use. Another is the provider would notify the jurisdiction of whether the facility that they use accepts compostable plastics. And I was wondering, are these notifications something that we have to keep in our records? Are they required, or are they just suggestions and optional?
Hey, David, good question. Whether that was the last question, that was a lot to wrap my head around. Let me look. Or Kara, do you have a solid? I kind of have an idea, but I don't for sure.
Yeah, I do need to look at record keeping, but for sure, Dave, it does have to be reported in your annual report. So I think that's where we ended up putting that, but Alan can quickly check the record keeping section in Article 3. But for sure in the annual report, if you're allowing compostable plastics or plastic bags, you will have to report that in your annual report. And soon, pretty soon, we will be sharing more guidance on that. So did that help answer it while Alan's looking?
Yeah, and David, what I'll do is I don't want to rush it. We could follow up with you, David, and just provide, ensure we're giving you an accurate response to your question, but we'll definitely be in touch.
Yeah, but
okay.
I think to that point, since you are going to have to report on it in the annual report, Dave, you're going to want to keep it somewhere.
Okay, yeah, we'll make sure we hold on to that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll also add that it is referenced in the record keeping requirements if the jurisdiction allows compostable plastics in their green container, and if the jurisdiction allows organic waste to be collected in plastic bags, that copies of written notifications are maintained in the implementation record. There might be more that you have to your question there, so if your question still isn't answered, then we can follow up with you directly.
Thanks, Priya.
That was helpful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. So this concludes today's Q&A session for the webinar. I'd like to hand it back to Julia for some final comments.
Thank you so much. So I just want to quickly thank our CalRecycle team for their wonderful presentation today and for your help answering these questions. And thank you everyone who participated today for all of your questions as well. For any questions that we were unable to respond to today during the webinar, please feel free to email the SLCP inbox with your question, or you can follow up with your local assistance representative and we will make sure to get your question answered. Again, we just want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us. We know your time is very valuable, so we appreciate you being here and all of your questions. So that will wrap us up today. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.